A famous politician once said that Britain was an island almost made of coal and surrounded by fish. Certainly, large areas of a country have a lot of coal not far below the surface. It was a neat way of saying that we as Britons need never be cold or hungry. Times were pretty tough then, but it was reassuring to be reminded that with hard work we could catch enough fish to feed ourselves and win enough coal from beneath the earth to heat our homes and run our factories. Well, over the years the fish stocks have dwindled. We have to share what's left with the other countries of Europe. But what is amazing is that we know now that there is more coal under Britain than we ever thought possible. Extensions to existing mining areas and some completely new coal fields have been mapped in a wide-ranging program to discover the true extent of Britain's coal reserves. Coal. What is it, some of you may ask, especially if you live in a big town or city? It's not surprising that we don't see very much of the coal that's mined in Britain. Most of it's delivered in bulk to power stations or factories. You may catch just a glimpse of the coal as it's whisked on its way to a power station, 1,000 tons at a time. More than 2/3 of all the coal mined in Britain is burnt to make electricity. Most of the really big power stations are sited near to the coal mining areas that supply them. Coal for use in the smaller factories and for homes will be carefully graded and stockpiled, ready for delivery locally. Some of it specially packed to make it easy and clean to handle. All you will probably see of this coal are the stacks of plastic bags outside the hardware shop, garage, or perhaps the greengrocers. Quite a lot of people use coal to heat their homes, but in towns we may have to use a smokeless fuel. That's coal which has been treated so that it burns without a smoky flame to help keep the town's air cleaner. Coal is a form of stored energy, the sun's energy. When the sun shone down on Britain millions of years ago, more than 250 million years ago in fact, it was helping to make the coal that we are using today. All those millions of years ago, things were very different in our part of the world. Where the coal fields are today were great swampy tropical forests, rather like the forests of the Amazon or the great rivers of tropical Africa are today. Dead leaves and fallen trees mingled on the swamp floor with mosses, ferns and water weeds. The mass of decaying vegetation gradually increased until, perhaps because of a great flood, a volcanic eruption or an earthquake, a river would change course, and where there was once forest became a huge sandbank or miles and miles of mud flats. All this happened many times over. As each layer was buried deeper, the weight of layers above than the heat of the earth below turned the decayed forest into coal and the sand and mud into rock. While the coal measures were being built up, and indeed ever since, the surface of the earth was moving, slowly but with enormous force. The layers of rock and coal were pushed from the sides so that they buckled, forming arches and hollows miles across. Often they would crack under a tremendous tension and great chunks would slide up or down. This is called faulting. Glaciers during the ice ages and rivers and seas in warmer times have cut into these folds in the surface of the earth, causing the layers or seams of coal to become exposed. Our ancestors often scavenged for coal on the seashore. They found it burnt well and stayed hot for a long time. But in those days, the forests of Britain were still huge, so for a long time there was no increase in the demand for coal. Wood was still plentiful and cheap, and the country's population increased only very slowly. In the 14th and 15th centuries, many of our great cathedrals were being built. Merchants and craftsmen were beginning to prosper and provide themselves with fine houses. Large quantities of wood were used in building these houses. So, around towns and cities, wood was becoming scarce and consequently expensive. Large quantities of wood were also being used for building great fleets of ships, for exploration, trade and war. Since railways hadn't been invented yet, and the roads were mostly still only fit for pack horses, the important cities of this period had grown up on tidal rivers or estuaries. So, when there was a market for coal, it came in by sea. It was, in fact, called sea coal to distinguish it from charcoal, which was made from wood. The increasing demand for coal led to more determined and sophisticated mining methods. The miners dug deeper into the hillsides and contrived ways to drain away water, provide a supply of air, and get the coal to the surface as quickly as possible. The other widely employed method of getting coal was the bell pit. We call them bell pits because of their shape. Bell pits were rarely more than 10 meters deep, the height of a two-storied house. Coal was taken until there was a danger of the pit caving in, then it would be abandoned and another started a few yards away. These small mines were often just family concerns, and the coal would be sold locally. Many different systems of mining were tried out as the coal trade developed during the 18th and 19th centuries. By this time, coke made from coal had largely replaced charcoal in the iron-making process. From now on, iron could be made and worked much more easily and cheaply, and in much greater quantity. Demand for iron meant demand for coal in the form of coke. For miners in those days, work underground was hard and dangerous. The only power underground was muscle power. Even children as young as 8 or 9 were expected to work 12 hours a day, every day except Sunday. Candles and crude oil lamps were still the only really practical means of illumination underground. During this period, there were 2 great obstacles to increased production in our mines: explosive gas and water. The first of these, gas, was by far the more dangerous. Mixed with air, a spark or flame can ignite it. Hundreds of men and boys, and sometimes women, died or were injured every year in the explosions and fires that resulted. But the invention and development of the safety lamp brought about the biggest saving of life in the mines. Scientists and engineers such as Sir Humphrey Davy and George Stephenson worked to perfect the safety lamp. This is one of the designs of safety lamp in use today. These days, its main function is to test for the presence of gas rather than give light. The flame changes size and color when flammable gas is present in the atmosphere, without the risk of causing an explosion. The other serious problem for miners about 200 years ago was water. With only horses to work the primitive pumps, flooding caused many small mines to be abandoned and made work impossible at many others during bad weather. Steam power came to the rescue. Thomas Newcomen's invention of the steam pumping engine revived the fortunes of the coal mines, allowing production to be greatly increased. Within a few years, the efficiency and power of the beam engine had been considerably improved. Machines like this one drained mines, pumped fresh water supplies to towns and cities, and raised water for canals, which by now were carrying much of Britain's freight. Horse-drawn narrowboats could carry about 40 tons of freight, but their average speed was about 2 miles an hour, a slow walking pace. The next great step forward in the Industrial Revolution that was going on in Britain was to link the power of the steam engine with the potential for speed and flexibility of the new railway. The coal industry would help to make that step, and again, in its turn, would benefit from it. The first steam locomotives were built for collieries and ironworks. This is an exact replica of an engine called locomotion. The original was built in 1825 by George Stephenson for the world's first public railway line, which ran from Stockton to Darlington in the northeast. The coal mines continued to prosper, supplying coal to run the rapidly expanding railway system, as well as coal to make iron for the rails. Now there were steamboats, too, that needed coal. Since the start of mining, coal was brought to the surface using horsepower. Usually only 1 or 2 horsepower. The horse gin, as it was called, was slowly replaced by steam winding engines, based on the old pumping engine, and later by the horizontal cylinder design. Steam engines wound coal to the surface much faster than horses could. But even steam was about to come to the end of the line. The introduction of electricity, both on the surface to power ventilation fans and winding engines, and underground to operate drilling and coal-cutting machinery, transformed the mining industry and made it what it is today. On the surface, not all mines look as modern as this, but they all use modern techniques underground to win the coal and bring it out of the mine. Let's see how it's done. This is the control room. From here, contact can be made with all parts of the mine, from the manager's office to the farthest working underground, by telephone, loudspeaker system, or sometimes radio. The condition of the atmosphere underground is checked continuously by automatic instruments, and the movement of coal along the underground tunnels, or roadways as they are called, and up the shaft is controlled with the aid of a computer. Often now, several mines will be linked together underground, so that the coal from all of them can be brought to the surface at the most convenient place. The control room may well be monitoring the underground operations over an area of 20 to 30 square miles. Remote-controlled video cameras help to monitor the performance of machinery in all parts of the mine. The coal travels right from the coal face to the surface on an endless belt, called a conveyor belt. We shall see a lot of conveyor belts underground, as they are the most efficient way of transporting coal. Quite a lot of mines have a drift, or sloping tunnel, so that coal can be brought to the surface without ever having to be loaded into tubs or wagons. Unlike those early mines, these drifts will be a mile or more long, sloping steeply all the way. Although coal can be easily transported over long distances on conveyor belts, materials, that is, steel girders, cement, machinery, and men, are usually carried down a shaft in a cage. Yes, that's what it's called, but it's really just a lift. This is the first stage in the journey to work for the many men who still have to work underground in the mine. After changing into workwear, which is a specially designed set of clothing issued to all miners, the next thing is a visit to the lamp room. Everyone collects an electric cap lamp and a self-rescuer. Inside the small container is a mask to use if there should be an underground emergency. It will protect the wearer from the fumes of an underground fire or after an explosion for long enough to get to safety. Safety is a top priority in all our mining operations. Everyone collects 2 tallies, numbered metal discs.
375.
One of these is given to the man in charge at the top of the shaft, who is called the banksman.
Check 261, please.
The other tally is retained by the man going underground. In this way, if there should be an emergency, it would be easy to check that everyone had been accounted for.
Help, Tubman!
Let's follow them down below and see what mining is like today. As soon as the cage is full, the banksman signals to the winding engineman and the cage is lowered away. These days, the winder is driven by a powerful electric motor. 500 or perhaps even 1,000 meters below, the men leave the cage to walk to their train. The roadway near to the bottom of the shaft is well lit with electric lights in gas-proof housings. The mine is divided into several districts, with one or more coal faces being worked in each. The ride on this train will save time and effort getting to a working district perhaps a couple of miles away from the bottom of the shaft. The train is hauled by a powerful locomotive, and the engine is flame-proofed, like the electric lights in the main roadway.